Hello again. So, today I have something here that a friend has loaned me. It's a fascinating creature. And you're going to look at it and say, well, Tim, that's a sword. And I'm going to say, but you're wrong. This is not, in fact, a sword. Well, you're kind of right. This is a bayonet. This is a bayonet from the late 1800s. It specifically fits what's called a Chassepot rifle. It's a French rifle. And it is in fact classified as a sword bayonet, which is insane. But it was part of the military doctrine at the time. It is a fascinating little piece. A friend of mine owns this. He has two of them, actually. They're in great shape. He seems to think that they are originals. I think they are replicas, but the more time I spend with them, the more I am completely unsure. I haven't done a whole lot of digging on these yet, but judging by some of the patina and some of the markings, it may actually be a legitimate one. The way these worked was, you can see there's a cut in the back of the handle here, and a detent here, and it would slide up in, and the muzzle would obviously fit through this one, and it would lock onto your bayonet lug under here, and it would just ride right against it, giving you 23 inches of blade sticking off of your rifle, which to modern standards is insane. However, at the time, that was considered the thing to have. This one also retained a J-shaped quillion, which I like as a sword fighter, if number one you like to finger the blade, or if you just like to have something to catch blades on. As a short sword, this is quite nice. As a bayonet, in modern standards, I would say that this is ridiculous. This is, in fact, how the point was made. It's a decent thrusting point, but this is definitely more of a cutting implement. If you are a saber fighter, you would find that this would work fairly well for you. As a saber fighter, I can tell you that it moves differently than you're expecting a short saber to move, but it does move well. If you look at the overall shape, you may find that that is a familiar shape if you've spent any time with Middle Eastern knives, or if you have a familiarity with any of the movies from the late 1990s, early 2000s involving Egyptian mummies. You may recognize this shape. This is, in fact, called a yataghan shape. Once again, why it was adopted by the French, I'm not really sure, other than they were involved in areas of the world where that shape would have been a normal edged weapon shape at the time. And it is an effective cutting and hacking shape. You know, you're definitely going to get a good cut here, you're going to get a good hack up here, and they did thin the tip nicely, so you can get a good thrust. She's got some flex to her. Not terribly stiff, but not too floppy. Once again, if you're dealing with something like a bayonet, you're definitely going to be doing a lot of thrusting work, so you definitely want a good rigid spine, which they've done here. They left like an I-beam shape. It is heavily fullered. Once again, for weight and for structural shape, pretty good design. You know, if you sharpened it really well over 100 years, of course, you know, you would wear down into that fuller, but that's not really an issue. Once again, this was a wartime thing, so it wouldn't have gotten that far. But it handles quite well. She balances about an inch in front of the quillion. We've got a nice brass handle. It's ribbed, so it's decent. It's only about 4.5 inches. So if you have large hands, you may find this slightly uncomfortable. I, once again, like a little bit larger handle because of my hand shape. But if I'm going to finger it, it's not terrible. So a little bit of, as a short sword, it's quite nice. But a little bit of why you would want a sword attached to your muzzle and why that was used. I'll explain slightly. Hopefully it'll make sense, but it probably won't because it's still silly. The idea was basically to turn your rifle into a spear, which is what bayonets have always done. At that time, what they taught was a long, almost lunging thrust. And if you are familiar with competition competition saber fighting or competition epee or anything like that, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, I'm sorry. If you look up any of those long fencing thrusts, you'll see. And they would literally do that with a rifle. They would couch the rifle as far back as they could, do a giant lunge forward, and extend as far as possible in order basically to cover as much ground as you could. The issue was found that parrying such a long, heavy, clumsy thrust was fairly easy to either knock it aside or step out of the way, because when you attach this to a 15-pound rifle, you're losing that speed, agility, and slight tip adjustment that you can get from an epee, a foil, or even a fighting saber. So you become more clumsy. It was a great idea. You're covering a lot of range. I mean, you could almost cover, with a full-sized, say, Swedish rifle or whatever. You're already talking 4 feet, plus another 2 feet here. You're talking 6 feet, plus the entire extension of your thrust. You're covering a lot of ground. But once again, it's fairly easy to defeat. Used as a standalone sword, I would say this is quite nice. But attached to a rifle, I would say it's ridiculous. It's also going to make the front of your rifle, 1.5 pounds heavier, which is going to affect the accuracy of your rifle fire. And once again, now you've got 1.5 pounds hanging off the front of your rifle. So when you do go to thrust or use it as a bayonet, now it's much heavier on the front. The fact that during World War II and even during World War I, a lot of sword bayonets were cut down, either in the trenches or sent back to their armories to be cut down, is an attest to the fact that this was just completely unnecessary to be this long. And the other thing is, you've got this nice, beautiful chopping shape on the front of a rifle, which doesn't really work. That's why most of your bayonets, especially later on during the Cold War era and stuff like that, were spike bayonets, because they were simply made to thrust. Here in the States, we went with a much shorter bayonet for close quarters work and to be a little bit more handy, and basically because you had to carry a knife around anyway, so why not make it able to go on the front of a gun? But it's a neat relic to a time gone by where we were kind of transitioning from a culture that still carried swords to a culture that used bayonets to a culture that started carrying pistols as a sidearm. I believe it was Churchill was in a battle in World War I, and his sword arm was injured, so he was carrying his pistol, and came up against a dervish and swore if he had had his sword that day, he would have been dead. So like I said, it's one of those weird kind of times when we were going, well, maybe, maybe not, who knows. But it's like I said, a very nice short sword, very nice design, very light, very handy, very well balanced. I like the shape of the blade. I like that it's full tank construction. I like that it's a good heavy brass handle. But I would definitely not put it on the end of a rifle. If you've used any of these, you know anything about them, if you have an interest in sword bayonets or bayonets in general, please leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you think I'm completely cracked and you think there's absolutely a way to use sword bayonets that would be anything other than ridiculous, I would love to know about it, because I just cannot. Having tried those moves out, having watched the training videos, the few training films that are available from World War I, it's just not a great technique. But I would love to know if you've had some otherwise experiences. So once again, this is a Chassepot sword bayonet, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. So thank you.